Hi people, I trust you're all well. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I make this fried yam and egg stew recipe. It's inspired by my Nigerian roots. So this is a vegetarian recipe with a lot of flavors. So it's got the sweetness from tomatoes, it's got the undertone of bitterness from yam, it's got that umami flavor from yam, and then seasoned with salt. For this stew, I use 6 tomatoes, 1 onion, I use 3 eggs, and 1 Scotch bonnet. So I went ahead and I chopped my tomatoes like so. If you like yours a little finer, then you can always go on and cut them into even smaller pieces than I had done, but I like mine to have some texture to it, so cut it to this size. And then I went ahead and I chopped my Scotch bonnet. I don't tend to have like a specific size. I just sort of roughly chop it. And then went on to the onions again. With this, finely chopped, just to get that contrast of textures. And so the next thing I did was to whisk the eggs. I seasoned with a bit of salt, and that was that. I placed a small amount of oil, enough to cover the base of the pan, into my frying pan, and then I tossed the onions in there. I let them brown for a bit, tossing them around as I went along. And when they felt ready, I went in and threw in the tomatoes that I chopped. I let the tomatoes release their juices, or start to release their juices, as you can see here. And then I went in with that chopped Scotch bonnet. Again, stir this in, and you're ready to have your eggs introduced soon enough. But seasoned with salt. I also like to season with a bit of curry powder, but this is very much optional. I just like the flavor that it gives. And then I think the last thing I did was to get the eggs in there. If you want yours to have a smoother consistency to it, then at this point you really want to start mixing in those eggs in to give it like a more of a scrambled egg effect. But I like mine to have some sort of meatiness to it, so I tend to leave it that way. Anyway, I went ahead and I prepared the yam. I cut them into discs. If you're new to yam cutting, you will probably find this a little tough to start with, but if you just place your knife on top of your yam, lean over it slightly to get that leverage from your body weight, you should be okay. So this is the thickness that I like my yam discs to be in, but you can always cut yours thinner if you want, or even bigger. So you might find some slices of your yam might have this rough patches in them. It doesn't mean that the yam is rot. It is perfectly okay to eat, just cut those bits out. So to skin the yam, you could either place it on a chopping board like I've done here, and just cut those edges out. Or if you're feeling particularly confident, then you could try the second method that I've shown in this video. I particularly find this easier to do. I find it faster, so I generally lean towards this method of chopping. So after I'm done skinning the yam, next thing I get on with is deciding the sizes for the chips. So because I like mine to have a crunchy outside and like a thin layer of softness on the inside, I tend to cut it to this size. But at this point, you're the boss. You can decide how thick you want yours to be or how thin you want it to be. But I particularly like this. Gives that crunch. So yeah, here you can see that I've cut one to be particularly larger or more like a wedge size. So I've just done this to show you how you can easily get rid of some of those patches in your yam. It doesn't have to mean that you get rid of an entire chip. The rest of it will be perfectly fine if you just get rid of this spots in it. So then I went on and rinsed the yam off. If you've been handling the skin of yam, you might find that you've introduced some of the dustiness of it onto the main slices. So I just pick it off like so. And then I go on and I sprinkle a bit of curry powder to my yam. This is optional, but I like the flavor it gives. And then some salt, and that's about it for seasoning of the yam itself. So I toss it around, make sure that I get all that seasoning coating all around the yam. While I'm doing that, I have my oil on fire. I have about 500 mils of sunflower oil, but you can use any oil of choice at all. So to test that your oil is hot enough, I use one chip. If that chip starts bubbling, then you know you're good to go. So I went ahead and I threw the rest of those yam chips in. Once all your chips are in, you want to sort of reduce the heat a little bit because you want this to cook very evenly. You don't want the outsides to burn while you still have uncooked insides. When you know your yam is done, you'll find that it starts to float a bit, they start to feel lighter, and the skin starts to bubble a bit as well. You also get this brown tone to it, so you know you're good. So at this point, I'll take it off the heat and serve. So hopefully you get something that looks just as good as this looked and tastes just as fantastic as this tasted. Thanks for watching and enjoy.